Just before I started this video, two women walked by and they were in a very heavy conversation. And so I didn't want to say, hello, how are you doing? Because I would have scared the daylights out of them. I'd like to focus on a prayer of St. Clare, gaze upon Christ, consider Christ, contemplate Christ, and imitate Christ. But I'd like to just focus on the gazing upon Christ. Now, Clare would have gazed upon the San Damiano cross that spoke to Francis and told Francis to go and rebuild my church, which is falling into ruins. Now, at that point in time, Francis's heart is extremely broken. So not only does his heart need to be healed, but in that he needs to heal others, and that's part of the way that his own heart is healed. But when Clare gazed upon this cross, this cross not only contains the crucified Christ, but also the resurrected Christ and the glorified Christ. And so this was the source of inspiration for St. Clare. She saw that God was merciful, generous, and loving. And that's how she was able to be so kind and generous with the sisters that she lived with, even despite her great suffering of being bedridden. In our gospel reading, the Pharisees are gazing upon Jesus. And it's not because they awe and wonder at his words or even his actions. I mean, Jesus, we didn't hear it in our gospel text, but Jesus healed somebody with dropsy, which is a holding water, like retention of water. So this isn't a life and death situation, but Jesus' definition of Sabbath and the Pharisees' definition of Sabbath are different. Jesus believes that Sabbath is for rest and renewal. And so if you are suffering in some sort of way and Jesus has the grace and the ability to heal that person, then why not do that? So he does that so the person can experience rest and renewal. Whereas the Pharisees, they really stuck to the law. There's 613 different laws in the Hebrew scriptures in the Old Testament. And they thought that if you even broke the smallest of those laws, you offended God. And they also believed in a harsh God. And so, of course, you don't want to break these laws. And that's why they added thousands upon other laws to these laws, because they wanted to be sure that they kept to them. And this is also why they are so harsh with the people that sometimes Jesus hangs out with. He eats with sinners and tax collectors. They don't believe in a merciful God, but Jesus has come to this planet to reveal to us that God is merciful, God is loving, God is a God of many different second chances. And so the very point of the gospel reading is about humility. And we have to be humbled that we are part of the kingdom of heaven. This is a gift that's given to us. In other words, God reigns in our hearts. God reigns in the hearts of others. And so the Pharisees thought, because they were so great observers of the law, that they were part of the kingdom of heaven. But not only that, but they had the seats of honor in the kingdom of heaven. They believed that someone like a tax collector or a Gentile was outside of the kingdom of heaven. But Jesus has come to share that all people are included. In our first reading from the book of Sirach, we have ways that we can remain humble. And the first way is to be in tune with our own weaknesses. We all have weaknesses. And so it's not that we're supposed to be bad-mouthing ourselves, because that's not humility, but it can allow us to be patient and compassionate with the weaknesses of others. And of course, we all have different weaknesses, like we all have different gifts and strengths, and so we have to be aware of that. The other thing is we have to let go of pride. We always need God's healing mercy each and every day, and so we should always be open to receiving that. But if we get too proud, then we kind of say to God, it's okay, God, I don't need you anymore, when we need God more and more each and every day. And so, I'd like to just focus, though, on some aspects of Jesus, to reveal his humility. So when Jesus is born, he's placed in a manger, an animal feeding trough. He's humble. He grows up in an insignificant place, Nazareth. He's humble. He dies a criminal's death on a cross. He's humble about it. And then even before the cross, he washes the feet of the disciples. He takes the position of a slave as he washes their feet. He's humble. But then wait a minute, today he's eating a pretty fancy meal with the Pharisees. At one point in the Gospels, he is at the house of Martha and Mary, and Martha's providing all kinds of things for him. Then we also have the woman that puts oil, expensive oil, on Jesus. And then let's not forget the resurrection, and Jesus ascends to heaven at the right hand of God the Father. So where does Jesus' humility come from? It comes from knowing his identity. He knows that he is the Son of God. He knows that he is loved by the Father through the Spirit. And for us, we know and believe that we are children of God, adopted children of God. We receive all the rights and privileges as the Son of God. All the scriptures are promises that God will do through us, and so we can celebrate and awe and wonder at that. And so what a great blessing it is each and every time we gather at Eucharist to gaze upon Christ, to see the humility of Christ, so that we can be humble and we can be generous in being merciful and kind to the people in our lives.